This week, we are learning the two Parshiyot, which are actually the most listened ever Parshiyot throughout the year. In this week's Torah portions is the section that it was being listened by more people than any other Torah portion. And you know the reason why? Because it's the reading of Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippur, even Linwood comes here or somewhere. People come from their small places and they come join a community to be together this special time of the year. And the reading in Parshas Acharei and Parshas Kedoshim is what we actually read at Yom Kippur, both in the morning of Yom Kippur by Shacharit and also on the Yom Kippur in the evening by Mincha. These two Parshiyot is actually two portions which contains many, many commandments. We counted up more than 70 positive mitzvot and negative mitzvot just in these two Parshiyot, which, as my accountant here, Mr. Schneider, says, it is about 13% from the 613 commandments is only in this week's Parsha. And I don't think that you want to sit here and discuss every mitzvah. And I'm not sitting here and discussing every mitzvah. So I choose one mitzvah, which is one mitzvah which is actually associated with a number of other mitzvot. The mitzvah that we are going to discuss tonight is the mitzvah of admonishment, tochacha. I'm not going to discuss so much the halachic aspect of tochacha, which we have a shiur on it on Shabbat afternoon. I want to discuss more the conditions for proper tochacha, the way it's being explained by the commentaries and the way we are seeing it also in the Rambam and in other areas. We have a verse in this week's Parsha. If you have a Chumash in front of you, you can turn your page on Parshas Kedoshim, page 660 in your Blue Chumashim. It's on chapter 19. You should not hate your brother in your heart. You shall reprove your fellow. The word ocheach means approve, or it means admonish, or it's even poorly translated as rebuke. Veloitisa all of hate, and do not bear a sin because of him. This is, matter of fact, three separate commandments, two negative ones and one positive one. The two negative ones is not to hate another person. Number two is not to bear a sin because of him, which we're going to have to understand soon what it means. The positive one is ocheach tochiach, you shall admonish your fellow. Admonishment. The prophet in Amos says, and he describes how people hated the admonisher by the gate, et hamochichim bashar. I don't even know if I can see that verse here, but this verse discusses, no, I can't read it, but, Sanu bashar mochiach is in Amos chapter 5. The way they used to have is in the gate of the city would stand someone and he would admonish people and tell them about their misbehaviors and how they should improve their behavior. And not only does the prophet Amos say that people didn't appreciate the admonishment, they actually hated that person. And obviously it makes sense, because who wants to hear about its faults and what I have to improve myself and how I need to behave better and how what am I doing wrong here, and then what am I doing wrong there. Tochacha, the way it's called in Hebrew, is not easy. There is one area which talks about accepting tochacha, which the Talmud actually says in Masechet Tamid that you should love to be admonished. E'ehov et hatochachot. Even in Pirkei Avot, we have this concept. You should love admonishment. If you are considering to improve your behavior, you should have want someone to admonish you. There was actually some rabbis, I think they said about the Gaon of Vilna and others, which they used to hire an admonisher. They used to have someone that this was his job, to constantly try to improve their lives, direct them and correct them and tell them which they can do better. That's called the mochiach. But people usually are not interested in hearing, being told what to do, especially in today's day. The famous statement, live and let live. Let me live my own life, mind your own business. At the same time, it's also difficult to admonish someone, because when you admonish someone, you take a risk. The risk is you telling me, should I tell you, or you behave? So who wants to admonish? This consideration is actually mentioned in the Gemara. In the Gemara in Erchin, when the Gemara discusses this topic of tochacha admonishment, the Gemara says, one of the rabbis actually said, I wonder if there is still a possibility of admonishing these days. This is in the Gemara days. And he uses the expression, Omer lo tol kisam bein shinecha, Omer lo tol korah bein einecha. Which means, in other words, if you come over to a person and you admonish them in the expression that the Talmud uses, you tell them, there's a little piece of wood, a tiny little piece of toothpick is stuck between your teeth, which is not literally, it's more an example of something is like sticking with you, which doesn't belong in your behavior. What is the response of the receiver? You're talking to me about a little piece of wood between my teeth. There's a big beam between your eyes. Meaning, you're telling me about something little, I will tell you about something much greater and bigger that you are wrong with. So sometimes you look at it, why should I get into it? Forget about it. It's a problem. It's a problem for the listeners. It's a problem for the people around. Why should I get involved? So the Gemara says that another sage responded by saying, that's okay. Do not get nervous. Don't worry about it. He said, I also had this issue. And every time after admonishing him, we actually became even friendlier. To the point that there is psukim which says, Et asher ye'av yochiach. King Solomon says in Mishlei, we're going to discuss this verse soon, Al tochach letz pen isna'acha, e'of chacham ve'yahefcha. Don't admonish a joker, or let's means a joker or a person who's like kind of, lightheaded, because perhaps he will hate you. Admonish a wise man and he's going to love you. The Torah gives us a mitzvah of admonishment. So how difficult the mitzvah sounds, we have to figure out what is the best way to do it. Because it's a mitzvah. And you can't get out of a mitzvah. You can't get out of a mitzvah. You have to figure out how to do it, not try to ignore it. So we're going to discuss today a few conditions in admonishment. Number one is what the Rambam talks about, and this is, where is the location of the admonishment? The Rambam writes in Ilchot Deot, he brings about two types of admonishment. One he mentions is Kesheyechta ish leish, when one person wrongs another person, do not keep the hatred in your heart, but rather you shall go and admonish him, which according to the Ramban, according to the Orach Chaim, according to the Rambam himself, this is the connection from these two verses. It starts off by saying, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, do not hate your brother in your heart. And then it says, Ocheach tochiach et amitecha, you shall surely admonish him. What does not to hate have to do with admonishment? But the Rambam learns that what the Torah is teaching you, in order for you to be sure that you don't hate the person who had wronged you, you better get it over to him and admonish him for doing it. What does admonishment mean? Ask him, why did you do that which is so wrong? Why was that behavior? This is not the right way to behave. What are you going to gain by telling him? So according to the Rambam, what you're going to gain is that you are going to remove the opportunity of really hating that person. And you basically creating an enemy by the lack of admonishment. The fantasy in your mind and in your heart grows and develops so strongly that you're starting to think, wow, this guy is really bad. You even forget how the whole thing started. It started, like I said on Shabbat, it started in a simple misunderstanding that the guy, you thought he did not say Shabbat Shalom to you. He didn't even realize that you walked by him, but it doesn't matter. In your mind, the guy is something against me. You come home and tell it to your wife. This guy doesn't talk to me, doesn't say good Shabbos, not nice. Suddenly she finds, actually, there's something else not nice about him. And that's how it develops and it develops. So the Rambam, this is the halacha in Rambam, which is not only in Rambam. The halacha is actually qualified in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe brings it in section Siman Kuf Nun Vav, 156 in Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe writes exactly those words. He actually copies almost word by word from the Rambam. That's what the Rambam says, means lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, don't hate them. And how are you going to prevent hating them? By admonishing them. What is the continuation when it says, and don't be a sin because of it? The Rambam learns what it means to say is that by admonishing and while admonishing, make sure you do it in the right place so the person doesn't get embarrassed. Because if you embarrass him in the admonishment, then you, the admonisher, is going to violate the prohibition of embarrassing another Jew. So basically, it's three commandments which are consecutive, one after the other. Do not hate, and therefore admonish. And don't be rasin while admonishing is don't do it in public. What they say in Hebrew, b'makom nachon. Admonishment has to be in the right place. We're soon going to learn about the right time, but it definitely has to be on the right place. And this is the first condition when it comes to admonishment. Matter of fact, there's actually a Gemara. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin that there was Yerovam and Avot, he admonished Shlomo HaMelech, and he was punished. And the reason he was punished is because he admonished them in public. And when you admonish someone, you have to do it in private. Number two, a very interesting insight I saw by the Chida. Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, a famous sage, lived about 300 years ago, who wrote many, many books. The Chida, one of his books, we have it here too, is called Nachal Gdumim. Small book on the Torah. And he writes that he saw in a manuscript of some great tzaddik from the olden times, which translates the words of the last part of the verse. I'm all going in the verse. Velo tisa alaf chet. How do you translate the word tisa? Tisa means carrying, like linso masa, a load, right? And that's actually the way it's being translated in English over here. Don't bear a sin because of him, meaning don't bear a sin, meaning don't carry a sin while you admonish him. But tisa in Hebrew has another meaning too, like the Parsha, ki tisa. What does ki tisa mean? When you rise, when you lift up. Magnifying something is called linsoa, with a sin. Nesi'ad rosh, the raising of one's head. Mitnaseh. Mitnaseh, somebody who rises himself. Says the Chida, in the name of some, he writes in the name of, I can't see my words, in the name of some guy, he calls them Hakadosh. Hakadosh, the Shlomo, and I can't see the next of the words, but I saw it, but it writes as Stalin. Lot tisa lafchet, don't magnify the sin. Don't make it more than it is. The biggest fault that people have in losing an opportunity of admonishment, that they really lose it. You try to admonish someone and you end up exactly the opposite where admonishment should have carried you. Admonishment, like we saw in the Rambam, is supposed to carry you to what? To a greater friendship. And here they end up in hatred. What is it coming from? These words of the Chida. You admonish your friend, don't raise the sin. Don't make it like out of proportion. And you went, and you did. Hold on. Speak to him slowly. Tell him the way it is. The way it is enough. The moment the receiver hears that you had actually expanded it, he himself starts considering, he's not serious, he's making up stories about me. Why should I even listen to him? And the same token I saw in a book called Adrash Ve'ayun. This was a rabbi in Poland. He actually is the grandfather of the lawyer Nat Lewin. If somebody heard about the famous lawyer in Washington, you heard? His Zayda was a Rav in Poland. Of Aaron Levine, the Reisha Rav. He wrote a number of Sfarim. One of them I have at home, 5 volumes on the Torah called Adrash Ve'ayun. He also says, Lot tisa, he also translates the word tisa in a term of rising, expanding, and he says, don't look on that person that the sin is already too into that sin. Don't make the sin bigger than it is, and then you're going to say, why should I admonish him? He's so immersed in his sin. He's so part of it. The sin is even greater than the person that there's no way I can pull it out. I can pull him out of it. Says the Torah. Do not make the sin great, and don't make the sin so big that the person cannot repent. He does have a chance. He does have a chance. Every person has a chance. This is condition number 2. Condition number 3 is what the Rambam tells us. When you admonish someone, the delicacy that you have to recite and you have to pronounce the words of admonishment. The Rambam writes, Yedaber lo benachat ubelashon raka. You have to speak to him softly, with a soft voice. Veyodio, you have to inform the person who listens to your admonishment. The Rambam says, Sheino omer lo ela letovato. What I am telling you is for your benefit. I'm trying to make sure that you get to a good place and you end up in a good place. And therefore, I'm telling it to you the way it is. You can come and admonish someone. Why are you someone, what are you screaming? What do you mean? I'm doing a mitzvah. I'm doing the mitzvah with the greatest inspiration. You know? Sorry. That's not the mitzvah of Teichach. Rambam says the mitzvah of Teichach is the admonishment has to come with a soft, pleasant voice. and if you can't pronounce it or present it softly, then don't admonish. You have to remember, this is conditions in the mitzvah, which sometimes by not following those conditions, you're not only not doing the mitzvah, you end up doing the opposite of the mitzvah. You end up, not only you're not accomplishing anything, the accomplishment is a complete disservice to the person that you admonish. Even the Gemara says in Shabbat, it's brought on the Shulchan Aruch, that every Friday before Shabbat comes in, the man of the house has to ask 3 questions. Asartem, araftem, adliku et haner. Did you take off maaser from the fruit? Because in order on Shabbat you can't take off maaser. It's called fixing. So the portion of food, the tithing of the fruit, you have to do prior to Shabbat. So you don't want to end up on the Shabbat table. Oh, we have fruit. I'm sorry, we forgot to take off maaser. And then you're going to get all upset on your wife. Why didn't you do it? Or if you're going to get upset. So you have to say asartem. Number 2, araftem. You have to make a eruv in order to be able to carry the food from the chunk pot, which is by the baker, to the house. You have to have a eruv, a courtyard eruv at least. Did you do it? And you tell them adliku es haner, time to light the candles. And the Gemara concludes that statement by saying, but all those things, the Gemara says, has to be said benichuta, should be said in a pleasant, soft manner, in order, the Gemara says, bichdei ki eiched lekablu minei, in order for the people of the house should actually accept it and understand that if it wasn't done, let's do it now. If you're going to come in and start screaming, where is going to get Ma'aser? I'm not going to even answer you. You don't know, was the Ma'aser, wasn't the Ma'aser? I'm getting out of this house. I'm not doing anything. It's not for my nerves. Let everybody relax. I'm going to come back. The Gemara says it has to be benichuta. This is a condition. The Gemara says in order for someone to receive and to be able to accept what you are demanding from him. And same is what the Rambam, Maimonides, says when it comes to admonishment. That in order for the admonishment to be effective, he says, Yedaber lo benachat. You have to speak softly, not only speak softly in a soft voice, but introduce your goal. And the goal is, before you admonish him, says the Rambam, whatever I'm going to tell you now, I mean you're good. As he says, letovato lehavio lechayei haolam haba. I want you to get a proper share in the world to come. And that's why I'm even talking to you. That's the reason I am discussing it. It's a hard one. Oh.
It's like saying, don't take it personally. Don't take it like I'm against you. Take it as if I'm
Exactly. And mainly it has to be with consideration, with love. All the commentaries, if you look in the Kli Yakar, and the 6 Parsha, the Acharei, they all speak about this connection, because the next verse is V'ahavta kamocha, and it starts, do not hate your brother in your heart. They don't learn like the Rambam, that it's only in order to release you from hating. They say that not to hate a person is really the purpose of why you admonish him. If you don't like someone, you know what the worst thing you can do? I really don't care what you do. I don't care. Don't talk to me. Do whatever you want. And that's the biggest statement, that you don't love him. Parents sometimes think, you know what, I'm not going to tell my kids what to do. You think that your son is walking away happy. My father doesn't tell me what I need to do. No, that's from your side. I'm talking the way the child responds to the fact that you don't admonish him, is not that he's not admonish me, wow, such a good father, he doesn't scream at me, he doesn't tell me what to do. The way they take it is you really don't care about me. I always say the word that Hashem gave the snake to eat from the sand of the earth. Hashem told the snake, I don't want to care for you anymore. Take care of yourself. And you know what? In that case, have food from today to tomorrow. You don't turn to me to ask for anything. So wherever you're going to go, you're going to find your food, as long as I don't have you turn to me. Hashem telling someone, don't turn to me, is the worst you can hear. The idea of having admonishment, says the Kli Yakar. He was a rabbi in Prague in the same time of the Maharal, also over 500 years ago. He's buried right next to the Maharal in Prague. He says, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, do not hate him in your heart. Ocheach tochiach, that's what's going to inspire you to admonish him, because you care for him, you don't hate him. The one who hates someone gives up on him. The one who loves someone gives them a chance. Matter of fact, the Baal Shem Tov once said to one individual who he used to admonish, he was a tzaddik. The Baal Shem Tov says, you're admonishing people, you care for them really? You know what they go through? You ever went through the challenges that they go through? And do you even speak to them on another occasion besides the occasion of admonishment? If you sit with them by the Kiddush, every other Shabbos, every Shabbos, and you daven in shul with them, and you invite each other to each other's houses once, twice, 3 times, 4 times a year, and you go out for Christmas Dorten, then, let me admonish you too. So you spoke to them about elections, and you spoke to them about the situation in the Middle East, and you spoke to them about the rabbi and the gabbai and the shul, and you spoke to them about Kiddush, and you also admonish them. But a guy that you never say a word to me. He never say a word to me. Suddenly you realize that something appears to be wrong behavior, and suddenly you know me. You come over, hello, you have to tell me something. You have to tell me something. They say a joke that somebody once came into shul, and this guy never was sitting in jail for 6 months. He trembled, he tripped on the situation, and he ended up sitting in jail. Then it comes to shul, 1 week, a second week, a third week. The 4th week, he ends up sitting in someone's chair. And the guy comes to shul, when he sees them there, and he says, hello, I'm sorry. This is my seat. This is why are you sitting here? This seat is not where we belong. So the guy says to him, oh, you really care where I sit? I was sitting in jail 6 months. You never asked me what happened and how I feel. I sat down in your chair. Suddenly you notice I'm sitting, I'm not sitting. I was sitting. For 6 months, I was sitting in jail. I'm here ready for 4 weeks. You never asked me how I was. You never asked me why I was in jail. How am I doing? I sat down on your chair. Suddenly you give me a all mishabelach. It's not right. People have their chairs. People have their seats. And even according to halacha, you have to daven in the same place every day. And Hashem is looking for you. And you give me all kinds of good proofs. Relax. Condition number 4. You already discussed 3, right? We spoke about the place where it should be, in a privacy, not in public, the words of the Rambam. Then we said what? That was number 2. Don't magnify the evil behavior. Lotisa. Don't make it like the Chidah says. And then number 3 we just said is what? That you have to say it with care, with love. The guy should feel that you really care for him. Then comes the 4th one. You want to have a successful admonishment? Admonish yourself too first. You're ready to admonish somebody else. Admonish yourself. Matter of fact, I saw the Bnei Yissaschar, one of the great Hasidic masters, right? Ocheach, tochiach. It's like a double repetition of the same word. In English, they usually say, surely admonish. Like ocheach, tochiach means like an emphasis. The Bnei Yissaschar brings ocheach yourself, and then tochiach others. First, try to improve yourself, and then you're going to be able to improve others. And this is actually one of the ways of admonishment. They say a story about Reb Zusha Anipoler, that the way for him it was a different issue. For him it wasn't the admonishment, it was more he didn't want to embarrass the person who did something wrong. But he had a problem, a challenge, I should say, that he was able to see on people's faces what he did wrong. What do you do in such a case? Clairvoyant, whatever it's called. Your friend, what is it? Clairvoyant. What?
Clairvoyant.
Clairvoyant. Imagine you go, somebody walks into the room, you see everything you did last night, the day before.
Take off your glasses.
It's very difficult. So what happened is Reb Zusha Fanipoli had dealt with a challenge. No, he didn't want to embarrass the person, but he also wanted them to do something about their behavior. So he used to go over next to the person, sit down, and start talking to himself. Oh, Zusha, Zusha. You cannot stop talking Lashon Hara. What's going to be with you, Zusha? How much are you going to continue with speaking Lashon Hara? And started like crying. Meantime, the guy who sits next to him, he was dealing with the same issue, but nobody knows. Starts feeling remorse and regret, and his feelings start to develop. Oh, this guy is crying. I need Lashon Hara. What should I say? I cannot stop speaking Lashon Hara. So that's how Reb Zusha used to admonish people by taking himself as an example. But sometimes, by the way, this is the way of admonishment to show. Sometimes it doesn't have to come in words. It doesn't have to come in words. You come in like express the real care that you have for the situation. I heard a story. There was a famous rabbi in Israel, Rabbi Aryeh Levine. You heard about Rabbi Aryeh Levine. He's called the father of the prisoners. He was in the times when before Israel became a modern day country. There was the young Etzel, Haganah people were in jail. He used to come visit them, make kiddush for them Friday night, and sit with them by the seder. He was like a real tzaddik. I mean, I don't remember. My mother remembers him very well. Rabbi Levine. He was a famous figure. There is books written about him, biography. Very special man. The Rebbe wrote about him in a letter, Oev Israel Be'emet, a true lover of Israel. He really loved every Jew. This is just in parentheses. He was a short guy. He was short, lived in Jerusalem. Once he was walking and he met a boy who never dropped out of his family, left religion. And the grandson sees that his grandfather, Reb Aryeh, goes over to this young man and he gives him a big hug and smiles to him and he asks him, how you doing? So the grandson tells his lady, lady, you didn't see? He doesn't even wear a kippah anymore. He took off his kippah. Rabbi Levine responded, what should I do? Hashem created me very short. My eyes only reached to his heart. I couldn't see more than I can't see above the heart. This is what I saw. I saw his heart, and by seeing his heart, I realized I could give him out. I'm a short yid. That was Rabbi Levine, a very, very sweet man. Very sweet man. So one of the stories about Rabbi Levine is that his son, he had, you don't remember, there was a Rabbi Levine here in Seattle.
Yes.
You remember him?
Yeah, Herschel
What was his name? I'm not,
at the temple.
no. He was a Bikucholim. He was a teacher maybe in the Talmud
Oh,
Torah.
no, that one.
I remember Kurt, what's his name? Anyway, he had a son in Seattle for a little while in the early years. Anyway, the story is that the Rabbi Levine's son was called with a few Knesset members. This is like in 1978, to go meet one of the ministers who was responsible to maybe help that Israel shall make a law against abortion. You know, in Israel, just like we're dealing in America, in Israel, they had the same issue. And they wanted to form a law, and I think it became illegal to abort, called Choga Apalot. But it was very difficult, with a big fight about it. So Rabbi Levine's son came over, and he walks into this Chaver Knesset. I think his name was Tamir, Shmuel Tamir. He sits down, and he says, Shmuel Tamir, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a story. My father once got a knock on the door. A guy came over to him and says, listen, Rabbi, I need your help. My daughter became pregnant with her husband. She doesn't want this baby to be born. She's not ready to become a mother. She wants to abort the child. Please help me to convince her not to do it. Rabbi Levine said, okay, give me the address. He went over to that house. The woman opened the door. Rabbi, come in, I can help you. He sat down, he looked at her, and he just started crying. Rabbi, how can I help you? And he just kept on crying and crying even more. And she obviously realized he's crying because he sees and he knows. And while he's crying, without any words, this lady says, Rabbi, I promise I'm not going to abort this child. I'm not going to abort it. She knew she felt that what is coming from. He left the house. And you know who that baby is? Rabbi Levine's son says, my father went, and it was your mother. And you are the baby. I said, what are you talking about? Call your mother. You read the story for me. He called the mother. And the mother said, yes, I was a young woman and I did not want to be pregnant. And it was the Rabbi Levine that came and didn't say nothing. He just cried and cried. And I said, you know what? I'm not letting this child abort. And that's you, Shmuel. You were born from that. Obviously, he voted against the abortion. You have stories like this. The idea of the story is that the best admonishment is really to be a personal example. Sometimes even more than the words, like Reb Zusha Nipoli. But the idea is, tochiach, admonish, but admonish yourself too. And as the Rebbe writes in Ayom Yom, very interesting. The Rebbe says, tochiach et amitecha, you should truly admonish your colleague, velot tisa alav chet, and don't bear a sin because of it. You know what the Rebbe translates? If you are admonishing and your words don't penetrate, you are at fault. It means that the word did not come out of your heart. Word that comes from the heart penetrates the heart. And the fact that you admonish him and nothing happened is because it wasn't really meaningful words. Condition number 5. Before you start admonishing, lift them up. Tell them, explain them, explain him his potential. Tell him that he has great things. The Shila Kadosh in Parshat Masei writes an unbelievable interpretation of the pasuk in Mishlei that we said earlier. What does the verse say? Al tochach letz pen isna'acha. Do not admonish a fool, a joker, because he's going to hate you. Or chach lechacham v'ya'efcha. Admonish a wise man is going to love you. You know what the Shiloh HaKadosh says? Unbelievable. He says like this: Al tochach letz. Do not admonish someone by calling him joker. Not don't admonish a joker. Al tochach, don't admonish someone by telling him, you are letz, you are joker, you are nothing, you are nobody. Ben isnacha, it's going to hate you. What are you skimming? Are you telling me what I'm not? Ochach lechacham, admonish the wise man, said the Shiloh, admonish by calling him a wise man. The Yahavcha, then is going to love. The way you refer to the person who you're admonishing, you can tell him, you garnish and be garnished. Why are you behaving like this? You already lost it before you even began. You're calling me a garnish, and then you're telling me, why did I behave like this? I can tell you why I behave like this. You know why? Because I am a garnish. I'm a joker anyway, so let me live my life and have fun. But if you go over to the person and you say, in Yiddish they say, es passt nicht. It's not behold of you. No, what's it in English? Lo matim lecha. How do you say it in English?
Doesn't suit you.
Doesn't suit you. That's the word. Lo matim lecha. You're a chacham. You're a chassid. You're a yid. You don't do that. Sometimes the biggest admonishment is like someone says, looks at you. You, come on. From you, and you really feel, I gotta behave better. And then comes an important one. This and one more, and this we're going to finish the class in the next 15 minutes. Here comes a very important one. It's actually in the Torah, and this says so many unbelievable, important lessons. Chumash Dvarim. Moshe Rabbeinu, Rosh Chodesh Shvat, little more than a month before his passing, Vayedaber Moshe el Kol Israel. Moshe speaks to the entire assembly of Israel. Be'ever HaYarden, Bamidbar, Ba'arava, Mol Suf, Ben Chatzerot, Tofel, Lavan, Di Za'av. What does he do? What's all these geographical areas? He's repeating with them the areas where they traveled between Egypt and now. Says Rashi, this is just code. You know how to write code? This is called writing code. Moses is taking the locations, the places where they angered God and they really misbehaved, and is using these locations by just mentioning the location, hinting them what and how they behaved in those locations. Right? Go to Chumash Dvarim a second, on page 938. It's also in English, you find it, Bamidbar, concerning the wilderness. It's not the wilderness, concerning the wilderness. Shortly after leaving Egypt, in the wilderness of Midbar Sin, the people complained that they have been led into a desert to starve. Ba'arava, concerning the Arava. This was the name of a particular plain called Arava, and this was the place when it refers to where the Jews were got involved and they were seduced by the Midianite women. Molsuf, opposite of the Sea of Reeds, when they saw the Egyptians running after them, and they said, "Why are we out? We should have better stay in Egypt." Paran is the story of the Meraglim, the spies. Ben Tofel velavan, Chatzirot is the story of Miriam and Korach. Dizaav is actually the story of the golden calf called Zav. So Rashi comes and Rashi reveals to us. Without Rashi, we wouldn't know it. Rashi takes obviously from the Medrash. But Rashi shares with us from the Torah Shebaal Peh, from the oral tradition, that all those places were actually, Moshe was not going over places. Moshe was admonishing them for their behavior. And the way he admonished them was mentioning locations where they behaved wrongly. And by that, he wanted to hint to them that it's time to get themselves together and remember how wrongly they behave so they can behave better in the future. Right. So this is actually, he did it, Rashi says, Mipnei kvodam shel Israel, due to the respect that Moshe has for the Jewish people, that's why he did it. Which is, by the way, also a way of admonishment, that you are respectful and you make sure that the person who receives the admonishment doesn't get embarrassed and hurt.
If this happened the month before Moses passed away, most of the assembly, the Jews at that time, had passed away.
Very good.
Also.
That was
So
Rashi's
how would
very
anybody
good. So
remember
Rashi, so first of all, admonishment is sometimes also to the children. They were young, but they saw what happened, so they should also make sure that they don't behave in that manner in the future. But Rashi tells us something unbelievable, which that Moshe, including the Jewish people, you're probably wondering what took me so long. If I want to admonish you, why am I waiting now before I die? I should have told it to you the way it is 2 years ago, 30 years ago. Says Rashi that Moshe tells them that I actually follow Jacob, Yaakov Avinu. Jacob calls his children before his death. He gives them blessings, but in those blessings there is also words of admonishment, starting with Reuven. Pachas kamayim, you rushed like water, changing the beds, making a whole commotion. Relax. And Yaakov, says the Medrash, tells Reuven, you probably wonder, now, why didn't you tell it to me 40 years ago when the story happened? Why are you only admonishing me now? Ay, 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 the Medrash says an unbelievable insight. That the Medrash wouldn't say it. I don't think I was ever able to say it. The Medrash says that Yaakov is telling Reuven, you know why I was waiting? Because Esau was still alive. And I didn't want to admonish you thinking that you might run off to Uncle Esau. Tati is the one who admonishes me. He's the one who tells me I'm not behaving properly. Let me go to Esau. By Esau, I'm going to be the big tzaddik. Yes. You admonish your child, you admonish your friend. Take a moment to think how many Esau's are waiting outside and going to be very happy to welcome your child, your friend into their groups, into their midst. But Rashi, so Reuven said, I'm waiting. Yaakov said, I waited. I was patient. I wanted to make sure that Esau is not around. You're standing on your we can relate to. You can understand. You're not just going to run off every time I'm going to tell you something. Next thing you're going downtown with your boys, with your girls, because my father is anyway not nice to me. He tells me things I should improve myself. Moshe Rabbeinu waited with the Jewish people till he died for the same reason. He didn't want him to run off somewhere. Yes. More than that, says the Medrash. Just three things. Rashi said it in Chumash. Number two, he didn't want him. I don't want you to be embarrassed. When you admonish someone, it's not easy for the one who received the admonishment to keep on seeing you eye to eye, because you know what I did last time, and you even told me about it. You know, the person who is being treated by his doctor or psychologist doesn't want to sit with the psychiatrist next to the door, next to the chair. He knows all my body myself. He knows all my behaviors. I would rather not be here, or he should not be here. So Moshe and Yaakov say they had the privilege to foresee. They knew they're dying. We don't know when we're gonna die. The belief should all live long, but the idea of timing it, timing it, timing it, patience. I know you have to say it, but hold on. You don't want him to run away. You don't want him to be embarrassed. You don't want him to come and start challenging you, and then you have to repeat that admonishment. No, the admonishments that you keep on repeating lose their value very quickly. Lose their life. You have to say it over more than one time. So it's not worth it. Then comes the final thing. This is from the Rebbe. The Rebbe says an unbelievable insight. The Rebbe, first of all, takes all the Rashis in Dvarim. I'm not going to go into the details now, to the specific, but the Rebbe learns that Rashi is not just telling us that he admonished them by mentioning the locations. Rebbe says that in these locations, Rashi wants to also tell us that while Moshe was admonishing them, at the very same time, he was also advocating for them. When he mentions in the desert, and obviously we know what he's alluding, the complaints, what took place in the desert. So it's not only alluding to the complaints of the people in their misbehavior, it's also an advocate, it's also adversary. You know why they complained, God? Because they were in a desert. And if you're in a desert, you don't see grocery stores, you don't see people around you, how should you not complain for food? So even though the admonishment is mentioning what they behaved wrong, but by using the term that is using, the location is actually at the same time serving as an adversary for their behavior. They came facing the Suf, Yam Suf. So obviously it admonishes them for the way they behaved. They gave up hope. They said, oh, the Egyptians are why they leave Egypt. But God, you know, water in front of you, Egyptians behind you. What do you expect? People who just came out of Egypt. The Rebbe goes on and shows that in every one of the terms, especially the way Rashi writes it out, is a further stage of limut zchut, of advocating for their behavior in those locations. And he continues and he says that admonishment with advocating for at the same time is the best type of admonishment. Why? Because by advocating doesn't just mean, here comes an unbelievable insight. Advocating doesn't just mean you probably meant well. You probably didn't do the wrong thing the way it looks like. When you learn Pirkei Avot, and it says that they done it kol adam lekaf zchut, give every person the benefit of the doubt, how do you usually understand it? You can translate this action into something negative. You can translate it into something positive. So you say, okay, it was probably positive, it wasn't negative. The Rebbe says that's not the only shot. The deeper meaning of that is when you see somebody behaving wrong, you know what you tell them? You did something wrong. It was a difficult challenge for you to stand by it, right? But the fact that you had a challenge, it means that God trusted you with tremendous energy to overcome the challenge. Hashem doesn't give a challenge to someone unless he can overcome it. So you didn't overcome it, but this power of God to overcome it, you got. He gave you. You didn't use it, but you got it. Teaching the guy what he has, teaching him that he does have the ability, is empowering him. That next time when he has the challenge, he realizes that actually, if I have the challenge, it must mean that God trusts me and I am empowered to overcome it. Let me try to do it. And that is where admonishment comes along together with advocating. But the summary, 7 conditions to admonishment. Ready? Condition number 1, the right place. Condition number 2, say it the way it is.
Right words.
Don't magnify the scene. Condition number 3, raise the person before you admonish him. Condition number 4, admonish yourself before you admonishing the other person. Condition number 5, do it with love, sensitivity. Condition number 6, do it on the right time. And finally, condition number 7, be an advocate for the person who you wronged. Tell him what he has and how he's able to overcome it. And with this, we're going to conclude the Parsha class. And I want to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing people coming in, there's a group of people who speak Hebrew, which I'm giving them a class in Gemara in Hebrew only. If you want to stay and listen to that class in Hebrew, you're more than welcome to join. If you don't speak Hebrew, better go home and relax. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Laila,
Rabbi.
all the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
Shabbos.